How we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you to our Around the NCAA recap show, recapping Week 3's action here in Season 4 of our Pitt Panthers Football Dynasty. Of course, 2019 football season, and the Panthers coming off a 34-0 drubbing of the Tulane Green Wave. A fantastic breakout performance. Kenny Pickett threw for 3 touchdowns. Trey Tipton caught a pair of touchdowns in the absence of starting receiver Maurice French. Just a really complete game all around. The first shutout that I think Pitt has pitched in this entire dynasty. Don't fact check me on that, but I believe it is. Just an unbelievable performance all the way around. Held Tulane under 200 total yards of offense, only 50 yards passing, albeit they didn't have the most dynamic of passing games. They really just didn't look downfield too often. They did run the ball well, but a lot of those runs came through their quarterback. They did have a nice option run early on, using Pearson, who had 97 speed, and then Bradwell, the quarterback, pretty well consistently together. But I think we countered that fairly well in the second half. Plus, they got behind, so they just were forced to at least start trying to pass. Didn't go particularly well, but it's nice we got to see some depth guys come in. AC Reese got his first ever action at quarterback, and Kenny Pickett with one of his best games at quarterback, really. 3 touchdowns, 278 yards. A good amount of passes, only sacked once, which of course is a good change of pace from being sacked 5 times in the opener. We ran the ball well. Sibley almost 5 yards a carry for 56 yards. London added 35 yards. Paul Lease on a jet sweep had a 33 yards total and 27 yards for an individual touchdown run. Great performance from him. Aaron Matthews did a nice job receiving for us. Thought he added some good depth there and had a nice number of catches. I think he had 5 catches on the day, I want to say. Yeah, 5 catches for 56 yards. Sibley looked good out of the backfield, added that nice little ability for us as well. We had just a lot of depth. You can see 8 different guys had 2 receptions or more. Tipton had 2 touchdowns with just 2 catches, so made himself available when he needed to, and we only had 1 drop. So 27 completions on the day, 1 drop. So really nice performance just overall from the whole team. Trey Tipton even added 4 pancakes out wide. So a really nice performance from him overall. Just a great complete showing, and it's one that we needed. The offense just looked very disjointed in the opener against Ohio. So having that ability here to come from, a performance that wasn't our best in week 1 and just put up absolute numbers offensively was fantastic. And then the defense was stellar yet again. What was great was seeing how well the defense played when, the turnovers and the big plays maybe eluded us. We didn't force a turnover in this game. We only had 1 sack. Keyshawn Camp had a sack. Wolfgang didn't get a sack. Jones didn't get any sacks. We had 1 sack on the day, and yet we still put in one of our most complete defensive performances that we've ever done. I think the play calling from Tulane probably helped us in that regard, but also just the fact that, the defense was very composed. Nobody got behind us. We weren't missing a ton of tackles. I think the only person that you could argue probably needed to improve in that regard was Paris Ford. He didn't have a single tackle on the day, but I don't anticipate him ever having another game like that, and we'll need him to really step up here against Penn State. And what's interesting, Jay Bump, career long field goal, 51 yards, a bit wind aided, but still his first ever 50-plus yard field goal attempt that he was able to knock through the upright. So it was just a great game all around, one that was really impressive. The biggest thing, I think, coming into our game next week is going to be, can the offensive line hold up? They've still given up 6 sacks on this young season, and that was against probably 2 of the weaker opponents that we're going to see on our schedule, especially defensively. So it's going to be very tough against a Penn State front 4 that we know is going to be incredible, have a ton of 90-plus overall rated players. So it's going to make things very, very difficult for us, especially playing away from home. That's going to add on a whole nother challenge for us on that side of the football. So that's going to be a real tough test for us overall. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we're really looking forward to the challenge, and I think it'll be a great test for this Panthers team. I mean, they made the playoff last year. The offense probably, you'd have to argue, at least for overall talent-wise, has maybe taken a step back, but the defense is next level right now, and they're playing like it. So this will be their first true test against a Penn State team that's put up, I think, 49 points in their opener, 47 points in the game after that. So they are scoring really at will, and we're going to have the opportunity to try and, corral that offensive effort, shut them down like we've been doing so far in this career mode. I think the most they've scored on us is 20 points, 2017 and then 17 again the year before, so we want to continue that kind of effort. But around the nation, looking at week 3, of course, we won in the top 25 as well. Auburn goes to 2-0 with a win over Mississippi State. Clemson with a high-scoring affair over Florida International, 52-38. Virginia Tech, huge ranked affair in the ACC, knocks off Florida State. UCLA in a top 10 battle beats Stanford, so that's a huge resume booster for them. They just missed out on the playoff last season. SMU with a big win over a Power 5 opponent being Baylor. Louisville over Kentucky in that big rivalry affair. Michigan, interesting enough, they've got 3 wins, and they've all been by a possession or less. They just beat Washington, #1 team in the country, by 3 points. Now they can only beat Ball State by 3 points, so very interesting there. Tennessee, dominant win over Ole Miss in a battle of A-plus rated schools, 34-10. Old Dominion goes to 2-0 with a victory over Cincinnati, so they're going to fall from the rankings after that devastating loss. Upset there, you'd have to say. Washington just escapes Western Kentucky 24-20, so a tough start to the season for the Huskies. Not exactly the way they wanted to start their title defense. They're basically going to have to win out if they want to have any hope of making the playoff and having an opportunity to defend their title. NC State with a win. LSU blows out Southern Miss 51-10, so another big game for the Tigers. They're looking fantastic offensively. Georgia over South Carolina in an SEC showdown. Michigan State knocking off Notre Dame, so they nearly took out Alabama. They took them to overtime, and this time they have Notre Dame come into East Lansing and pick up an unbelievable victory, 22-17. So Michigan State, they're a tough squad this year. You know, they've already got a loss, but I think they've proven they can beat anybody on any day. In the ACC, Duke, tough showing as they get blown out by Northwestern. Boston College bounces back from their opening week loss and beats the bejesus out of UMass 38-0. Virginia Tech, we already talked about their huge victory over Florida State, so that's a big statement in the ACC Coastal Division title race, as well as just the ACC overall. Georgia Tech gets a win. Syracuse gets their first win. North Carolina goes to 2-0 with their victory in the Battle of the Norths over Northern Illinois. Virginia gets their first win, knocking off Connecticut. NC State with the win over an FCS school. Wake Forest, tough draw for Ohio, taking on Wake Forest after playing us last week. So 2 ACC schools put a little bit of a beat down on the Bobcats. And Miami just escaping Florida Atlantic. Miami's offense can show them they can score, but their defense with some struggles there against the Owls, but they do still get the victory. NCAA Players of the Week, a couple of Pac-12 guys. Gary Baker for Oregon on defense, 2 sacks, forced a fumble and recovered that fumble. Victor Viramontes, the quarterback, had 130 rushing yards, is a pretty impressive performance. So 75 total yards and 6 touchdowns for him. For Clemson in their victory over FIU, Kelly Bryant, 434 yards and 6 touchdowns. And then Giovanni Simmons, Virginia middle linebacker, in their victory over UConn, sack, forced 2 fumbles, couple of tackles for a loss. So a really good performance for him in that matchup there. So we'll look now, after seeing how the things shook out this past week as far as games are concerned. What's the top 25 look like? Alabama's still #1. Oklahoma up to 3 because of the loss of #3 Notre Dame, who actually drops all the way out of the top 10. Tennessee's up to 7, Washington up to 8, Penn State to 9, Auburn to 10. Stanford dropped out of the top 10 as well because of their loss to UCLA. So Notre Dame drops down to 11. Stanford drops down to, I believe, 14. Texas is up to 12. 13. So they fall back to 13 with their loss to UCLA. Georgia up to 14. Pitt up to 15. So the battle this week is going to be number 15 Pitt versus number 9 Penn State. Huge top 15 ranked battle that's going to take place. Michigan up to 18, Virginia Tech up to 19, Florida State falls back to 20 after their loss to Virginia Tech. Michigan State's going to come back into the polls thanks to their victory over Notre Dame. So credit to them playing a tough non-conference schedule, Notre Dame and Alabama this year for the Spartans, and they come away 1-1. So not a bad performance from them, to be perfectly honest. And, of course, Cincinnati does drop out of the poll. So ACC schedule that we'll see coming up here. Virginia Tech and Old Dominion, a Virginia rivalry battle. Pitt, Penn State, a Pennsylvania rivalry battle. Georgia Tech, Georgia State, a Georgia rivalry battle. So we got a lot of in-state matchups going on that should be a lot of fun this week. Virginia, Florida State is a big ACC tilt that really is going to have an influence on, the overall picture. If Florida State loses, they're pretty much out of the ACC Atlantic title race already. Another big ACC game, Louisville-Miami, cross-divisional game there that's going to have huge impacts for sure. Wake Forest takes on Marshall, so actually a tough test for Wake. Boston College and Boise State should be a fun regional matchup there. Notre Dame and Clemson taking each other on as well, so some really huge matchups here in the early going. The Fighting Irish and the Tigers doing battle in Death Valley in Clemson there. Tennessee taking on Florida, big SEC battle. Tennessee's looked very good here in the early going. They're 3-0 already. Florida does have a loss, but they have a very strong squad, A+ rated, so that should be a good game. Top 11 battle, Notre Dame versus Clemson. College game day going to Death Valley for that matchup. Herb Street likes the Tigers in that one behind the strength of Kelly Bryant, who's been unbelievable in the first 2 games for the Tigers. Louisville and Miami. Herb Street likes Louisville, but Miami definitely has the talent up front to be able to come away with a victory. So it should be interesting to see how their offense does against Louisville. And then finally, huge top 15 matchup. Your Pitt Panthers heading to Happy Valley to take on the Penn State Nittany Lions at Beaver Stadium. It's going to be a primetime game, 8 p.m., national broadcast. ABC should be a ton of fun for the Panthers and the Nittany Lions here. Really excited for that matchup. And it's going to be a test of defense versus offense. Penn State, number 5 scoring offense, number 8 total offense in the country right now. Pitt has the number 2 total defense in the country right now, and an unbelievable pass defense, even that's only given up 144 yards a game. Albeit, a little bit aided by the poor Tulane effort that we saw. But it's going to be a battle of a couple of Heisman contenders offensively in Tommy Stevens, the quarterback for Penn State, and Miles Sanders, the running back for Penn State, who have gotten off to very hot starts to the season. The Panthers, of course, will have Maurice French returning. The senior receiver will be back from his bruised shoulder injury, so the Panthers will have great help with him coming back, and they're going to need it because they may need to put up some points here because they may have to compete with a Penn State attack that's been incredible. Stevens averaging almost 300 yards a game passing, 7 touchdowns already. Miles Sanders, they've had a bit of a two-pronged attack rushing the football because they have that kind of ability. Robinson at halfback as well. Andre Robinson's 93 overall, so they've used both of those runners throughout this early going of this season. Kind of a little bit of load management, probably more than anything else for Miles Sanders in these blowout wins that they've had. I think they've beat Kent State and Toledo, something of that nature. So a couple of teams that weren't going to give them any challenge, that's for sure. But when you look at this Penn State roster, I mean, they're unbelievable. Look at that defensive line: 96, 93, 93 defensive tackle and a couple of ends. Unbelievable there. Quarterback that's 97 overall. They've got a good kicker. Pass catching options in Jonathan Holland and Jawan Johnson. Shane Simmons, their backup defensive ends are 90+ overall. So even when you think you're going to get a respite that they're going to have to take guys out of the game, the guys they're going to put in are just as good. Tons of 90+ overall. As you can see, we're like a third of the way through the roster almost, and they're still at 88, 89 overall. Tommy Stevens, of course, was behind Trace McSorley for the past 3 seasons, sitting as the backup quarterback. He finally gets his opportunity to start, and he is making the most of it. Has great statistics so far for the Nittany Lions. So, of course, he's going to be somebody we're going to have to contend with, and he can run the ball. I mean, he's got 50 yards rushing a game. He has a lot of size. He's deceptively fast, and he's very athletic. So it's going to be a tough order for the Panthers to have to contend with him, especially because Penn State has been known to mix in some read option type tendencies, and they're going to have Miles Sanders in the backfield with him. 165 yards this year. He was the understudy to Saquon Barkley for the last 2 years, and yet he's been steadily improving in terms of his yards per game, and he can catch the ball out of the backfield as well. So a ton of weapons for this Nittany Lions offense. The one place where they're maybe weakest, which is going to help the Panthers, I think, now that they're a higher level of competition than what the Nittany Lions have faced so far, is they really only have 2 marquee receivers. Beyond that, they're relying on freshmen. Lawrence Lucas is a good player, Jake Madison, George Adams. So they have a ton of freshmen and sophomores that don't have a ton of experience. They're very raw. They definitely have some ability and should grow into very good players. But the Panthers are stacked in their defensive backfield. They have 6 players of 86 overall or better, including 4 of those players being cornerbacks. And so if there's one area they can hopefully try and shut down the Nittany Lions, is just put a ton of defensive backs on the field and force the Nittany Lions to beat them on the ground, because they haven't shown that they want to run the ball too much. I mean, they have a good offensive line, pretty solid offensive line, but the area where they're going to try and beat you is through the air, or where you can't let them beat you is through the air with those big chunk plays. So it'll be big for the Panthers to try and limit those big play opportunities that the Nittany Lions can have and force Stevens and Sanders to beat them with their legs, because it more than likely won't be a high-scoring affair for the Panthers. If you look at this offensive or defensive line for Penn State, 291+ overall right ends, 290 overall plus left ends. Defensive tackle-wise, they have 3 guys of 88 overall or better, led by Kevin Givens. I mean, it's an incredible defensive line they have. It's going to be the real true test for this Pitt offensive line that's been, I mean, if you had to give them a grade for this season so far, it's C+, B-. They've been able to run the ball fairly well. They've given Kenny okay amounts of time. He's been sacked on average 3 times a game, which is more than they would like. It's more than he was sacked last year. I think he had 23 or 24 sacks against, so maybe like a little under 2 a game. But it's going to be tough. And the other thing for Penn State, their cornerback depth, not great. I mean, they have 3 corners of 80 overall or better, but only 2 guys 86 or better. And Pitt has a ton of depth in the wide receiver area. Jay Keys has shown he can be a big contributor. Paul Lease has done very well. Maurice French may see a lot of time in the slot position. Trey Tipton's got 2 touchdowns from the last game. So the Panthers have a lot of good quality receivers that they may look to exploit this Penn State secondary. I mean, free safety, they're relying on freshman Joe Carr and sophomore Keith Poole to be the hard hitters at free safety. They do have a couple of strong safeties. Interestingly enough, Billy Ross, the redshirt sophomore from Scarsdale, New York, 85 overall. Pitt had high hopes to try and bring him in. Narduzzi is one of his big targets 3 seasons ago. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to convince him to come to Pittsburgh and play for the Panthers. He did choose to go to State College instead for the Nittany Lions. So it'll be interesting seeing him on the field finally for the Nittany Lions here against the Panthers. That should add a fun wrinkle to that secondary battle. But it's going to be a very interesting game. Let us know in the comments, do you think the Panthers are going to have enough to beat the Nittany Lions? What do you think the final score is going to be? It's, of course, away from home. It should be an incredible game under the lights. It's going to be a great, great matchup. So let me know what you guys think. As always, thank you so much for watching. Hail to Pitt. We'll see you on the field. Pitt Penn State coming up next. Hail to Pitt. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.